Hey, Kale here, doing a video today, my 10 good minutes on metaphors. In Iain McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary, which is it's a must read. I will put a link in the description below. I don't get any money from that, so no worries there. But you really should read it. It's a big book. It's one of those big idea books by Iain McGilchrist called The Master and His Emissary. Anyway, at a certain point in the book, he makes the claim that we are only as good as our metaphors. And uh, it struck me when I read it a couple of years ago, and it has given me much to sort of chew on. Like, what exactly does he mean? And basically, he's arguing that our metaphors are those things which we use to understand the world, and we compare this with that all the time, and you know, therefore, the more complicated life becomes, the more complex we need our metaphors to be. And so we recognize there's a power in being able to say, "Oh, it's like blank," or "Oh, it's like when da 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 da," right? Or "Oh, it's like how." Right? And in my many years of teaching, of course, I teach stories, right? I teach literature and poetry and drama and all that stuff, right? Stories. I have found that there's a resistance to difficult books, in part because to read difficult books, it almost presupposes that you know a bunch of other books. And therefore, there's no easy way to kind of start. And so I find that becomes a bar for a lot of people that, oh, well, how can I possibly read Dante? I need five other books in order to understand this one book. And I get it. To a certain extent, that's true. But the only way to start is to start. Might sound pat, but I mean it. Like, the only way to begin is at some point you have to get over the fact that you're going to be a terrible reader when you start off, right? And therefore, I find there's with my students, I have a little bit of an easier time doing this. Again, perhaps counterintuitively, because I can just say, guys, this is just what we're doing. This is what's required, and they don't get overly burdened by all these kind of things. And I think those of you who are my age and older in the audience here know exactly what I mean. Like, there's those certain things that you pick up when you're a kid that if you had to pick up as an adult, you simply never would do it because, my gosh, you're so terrible at it from the start. I think of a game like golf, for instance, a game that I have fallen in love with and fallen out in love with and fallen in love with again, kind of cyclically here. But golf is just impossibly hard. And when you watch it on TV, it looks so impossibly easy. These guys, on the PGA Tour and Live Tour, they're great golfers, just incredible athletes. And but my point is that the only way to start playing golf is to just be bad at it, and you're going to be bad at it for a chunk of time, and then all of a sudden you're going to be kind of competent, and then you sort of set that new bar. Like, well, okay, now I can sort of play 9 holes, and it's not entirely pathetic, and I can kind of get around, and I can sort of you know get around in 50 shots, something like that. It's not great golf, but it's also not totally and utterly embarrassing, right? And so you sort of set a new bar for yourself. Like, okay, well, I can now play 9 holes. Let's try to play 18. And okay, now I can play 18 holes and I can break 100. And please stick with me, those of you who are not golf fans, because I'm gonna tack back to our metaphors here in just a second. But the idea here is that um, in order to play competent golf, you have to play crappy golf for a period of time. And so let's take that to reading. In order to be competent at reading, let's say Homer or Shakespeare or Dante or Dostoevsky or whatever, fill in the blank, Faulkner, Joyce, Tolstoy, Austen, etc. In order to read those well, you're going to have to become have to find some peace with the fact that you're probably going to read them poorly, at least initially. But you will be amazed at how once you have one of sort of the big books under your belt, you start to see it everywhere. So if you can read the Odyssey, for instance, the Odyssey is one of those shockingly and continually salient books. It's a story that continues to speak to us these thousands of years later. And why? Well, in part, I think great books are great because they endure. My students, at least initially, want to think that, well, these are great books because it's some kind of conspiracy, like old mean guys like me who sort of want to make them suffer. And I say, no, that's not true. I don't want to make you suffer. I want to make you competent. I want to build out your metaphors. And this is where we have to begin. And so once you read the Odyssey, then it makes it a little bit easier maybe to read the Iliad, and then it makes it a little bit easier to read the Aeneid, and then you can start reading the Greek tragedies, and then you can kind of go on up and make your way all the way on through, hop, skipping, and jumping your way backwards and forwards and backwards with this collection of metaphors. And so you can see metaphor is like I'm comparing this to that. But I think you can also see that whole books function as kind of metaphorical reality. And I think that this points to what the philosophers will call the analogy of being. It's the kind of the great dance of analogies. And analogies are sort of like that which corresponds to another thing. And the powerful reality for us, or at least for me, as I've kind of done this for so long, is that our analogies can work backwards and forwards. We're not sort of stuck in this sort of chronological, just moving forward sort of way. And so that I can pick up a book that was written in the 19th century and it illuminates something that was written in the 12th. I can read something from a novel. Let's say, I don't know. Let me just pick one. This is always happens, right? You can read a novel like Toni Morrison's Beloved, and it can illuminate something from Greek tragedy. I mean, this is just a remarkable ability, this sort of backwards and forwards. And so, in part, if you know the Greek tragedies, it gives Beloved, say, something really. It sort of supercharges Beloved. But interestingly enough, when you read Beloved, it kind of goes backwards and it supercharges, Euripides, or something like that. And this dynamic quality of the tradition is, I think, predicated on this idea that our metaphors expand us out. They provide us with extension. It builds out our imaginary, right? It builds out our sensibilities. And so our ability to say this is like that gets kind of blown open. And why metaphors? And I think we always run the risk of falling in love with our own intellectual constructions, our abstractions, our models. Especially now, I think these things are kind of falling apart a little bit. But metaphors sort of plug us back in. It almost like they incarnate the mind which has this ability, this powerful ability to abstract. But a metaphor brings us back to the things of this world, to use a line from a Richard Wilbur poem. Love calls us to things of this world, right? But metaphors and analogies re-embody our minds and make them incarnate. In fact, I would even say that they keep us from a kind of runaway abstraction. And runaway abstractions are where we really get into trouble. I think you could make a sensible argument that the middle of the 20th century and into now the 21st century we are haunted by um, a runaway abstraction, so that even a human being can become an abstraction, a problem to be solved. And if you remember, solving a problem means to dissolve it, sort of to make it go away. And you can't really dissolve people without running afoul of the law and morality, right? So anyway, the power of our metaphors is that they reconnect us to something which makes us our own humanity. And we are only as good, to sort of bring it back to the beginning of this video, we are only as good and deep and powerful and profound as our metaphors are. And so a great And the good news, right? And I really do mean this. The good news is it's never too late to build out your metaphors. It's never too late to build out, the sort of the library of your mind. And I find this, and I never run out. Um, so to read a great work that I haven't read yet is an incredible treat, because it makes it vitalize. Can I say vitalize? It vitalizes, right? It makes alive again of all of this, the sort of the temples of the mind, these stories that I have experienced and made part of who I am. And it gives you an access to complexity. And it also gives you, as I've said in another time, it gives you something by which you can compare the current unknown to. In fact, the current unknown is almost impossible to make sense out of until you can compare it to something else. And so the only way to deal with novelty is do a little bit of code checking. And I think metaphors are our deeply human um, power to reconnect us to our own humanity, and reconnect that sense, that childlike sense of like, oh, this is just like that. Like that phenomena is so important. And so, look, that's why I do this. Actually, that's why I do this. That's why I want you to hit the like and subscribe button, please. I'm trying to get above 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube. And pay attention. I'm going to be doing some long form um, interviews. Got some people lined up, so pay attention here. Also, if you're interested in sort of how I sort of tease these out into sort of longer form writing, go check out my Substack, which is www.kalezeldin.substack.com. The link is in the description below. I really would appreciate if you could subscribe to that. It is for subscribers. I have premium content on there, and I do get occasional freebies out there. So please come check out my stuff, and thank you for showing up to 10 good minutes. Class is dismissed.